Alright everyone, we start off today clanking on the Johnny-come-latelys, which is literally the entire fucking legacy media, as well as a huge number of online commentators, some of which are perfectly independent, because really, other than Clankdom and a few other groups of people, basically you had to go to the underbelly of the internet, like 4chan or something, if you wanted to hear what was going on with COVID up until relatively recently. That's where I first saw the connection between the Wuhan lab, the virology lab there, and the initial epicenter of the outbreak that happened, early last year, technically late the year before. I hadn't even heard of it until around that period I saw it there. Now, I talked about it at the time. I first mentioned it, I think, in February or March of last year. I think Cullen actually might have been arguably the first, which is probably why he's been banned. For medical disinfo, by the way, no less. Razorfist talked about it, Goodman and a few others. Nobody in the legacy media did, though. Now, first and foremost, down below, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, some of the spicier content has to go only there because YouTube has made a lot of topics verboten. So you get 4 videos a day everywhere except for YouTube, essentially. Here's what bothers me. What bothers me is that for the better part of a year, people like me were considered extreme or politically motivated, or at the very least flat out wrong when we talked about the coronavirus epidemic. It was considered a conspiracy theory until a couple of weeks ago to suggest even the possibility of a human origin for COVID, even a possibility of a Wuhan lab connection. Basically, the furthest you could go is say the initial epicenter was in China, but you were supposed to pretend that you believed it came from eating bats or pangolins. We're now getting a legitimate, and this is a joint Norwegian study, by the way. There's some evidence to suggest that this virus is a bioweapon that was literally engineered retroactively to try to cover the tracks of it being technically a partially artificial virus that initially didn't have a human vector. We don't know this, but it's now speculated by a mainstream study reported on by the mainstream media. In fact, even the Wall Street Journal reporting this. You've got even the leftist element of the legacy media talking about the Chinese biolab now. But until literally last month, middle of May, if you talked about it like on YouTube, you'd get banned. This video would not have been able to be on YouTube 3 weeks ago. It would be considered medical disinformation. Now it's considered perfectly legitimate conjecture. The funny thing is there, though, for a year, people like me were considered politically motivated. Well, you support Drumfler and you're trying to blame the Chinese for this virus. How dare you? You're a xenophobe. Remember they were calling people Chinophobic there for a few months when they suggested this? Like when Trump had the travel restrictions to and from China? He was called xenophobic by Biden. It was considered a political job. People like me who supported that were considered to be highly political in so doing. It was against medicine. It's against legitimate science. Now on the flip side, we find out that for the better part of a year, the people that were opposing these things were the ones that were politically motivated all along. They were the ones engaging in disinformation. They were the ones engaging in a literal conspiracy by people like Dr. Fauci to cover for China, despite the fact that he himself, over a year prior, had conjectured that he had talked about gain of function. He had talked about the Wuhan lab being there at the epicenter, so it was kind of funny. He was ignoring staff that had legitimate concerns that was indeed where it came from. He literally ignored them and then chuckled about it in a different email chain to another person. Now he got caught with his pants down by FOIA. And why he didn't have a private Hillary Clinton-style email server to begin with is beyond me. They're trying to FOIA the rest of his emails. He's scrambling right now to prevent that from happening because he knows that his career fundamentally now is over. It's funny that the Biden administration refuses to fire him. Well, his job is safe for now. Why? What possible, even just for optics reasons, what possible good is it to have Fauci there? Trump made, by the way, a big mistake in having him be part of this response. Technically speaking, Trump's the one that puts him in there. Biden's just crazy for keeping him there. And it's a terrible idea. But we have the emails. We also, some people, by the way, they're trying to spin things. You will still see, as I initially said when the FOIA emails started becoming public, that you would see shills that actually are in some cases Chinese agents saying like really over the top things like, oh my god, it proves that COVID was man-made from scratch and it's going to kill us all and stuff like that. Predictably, this is happening. That's to muddy the waters. That's to make you look crazy if you're putting out very true details, because you're putting out fake ones at the same time with some of these infographics and stuff. So you have to do some digging in order to really know what's going on. But long story short, we now know that mainline individuals within medicine, including people who outright denied it, were openly considering the possibility of a partially human origin for the coronavirus epidemic. We know it came from China. That's no longer even, that's beyond conjecture at this point. They were trying to blame the United States for, well, the U.S. military deployed coronavirus in Wuhan. Well, that didn't actually happen. It came from China to begin with. It didn't come from pangolins. It didn't come from someone eating a snake, which was the most bizarre claim, because that particular vector wouldn't make any sense for that kind of virus to begin with. It was from the lab. That's what we know. Effectively, China unleashed bioterrorism on the world and now has killed tens of millions of people. Well, there should be some sort of retaliation for this. I'm seeing left-wing media suggest that. But it's a 180 from what they said a year ago when Trump was talking such things. When he said, hey, this came from China. See, we need to do more about the problem of the Chinese government. Oh my God, you're just xenophobic. This America First thing is racist. You're trying to stir people up to keep your job. All the time it was his opponents that were politicizing the issue. They were flat out lying, partially for political purposes. I guarantee it's not coincidental that all of this is coming out after the election. That's not a coincidence. It's that people got hoodwinked. They got sold a pig in a poke with Beijing Biden, Hong Kong, who was got voted for by 80 million people or whatever. They got sold a pig in a poke, those that voted for him, and they made a mistake. And they should have kept Trump aboard. By the way, if he was, you probably wouldn't even be hearing about these things. Probably. They'd probably still be verboten to talk about it. This video probably wouldn't even be made. But people like me were saying these things last year. Clankers knew the truth last February. The Razor Force knew the truth. The Salty Army. All of these groups of people. Matt Christensen told his audience early on. Lionel told his audience. H.A. Goodman. Many people. Malnu. Cullen. We all said these things. We were considered nuts at the time. Even, there were people, I remember the fucking comments, there were people when I was first remarking on it, they were telling me I was crazy, and they're fucking clankers. Well, don't go off the deep end, Sticks, they eat weird shit in the wet markets, it could have come from a pangolin. Well, that was always a possibility, but it was remote, it never made sense for that vector to be where it arose. Kamala Harris, back in May, I've still got the video up, I think it was in one of the primary debates, was talking about the need to censor this sort of speech because it was stirring up hate against Asian Americans. That's sort of the origin of the AAPI, whatever it is acronym the Dems use now, because they've alienated every other Asian in the country. They've alienated a large chunk of their own voters. Quick, lump them in together with Pacific Islanders and make it sound like they're a suppressed minority. Quick, so that they don't vote Republican. It's bullshit. It's horseshit is what it is. It's a wall of propaganda, and people like me who saw through it and spoke out against it, some of them got banned for it. There are people right now that are not allowed to be on Twitter or YouTube or something for misinfo that retroactively is not misinfo. We now know that it's true. Shouldn't they be restored? Shouldn't Cullen be back on the platform for his legitimate concerns about certain COVID-related topics? Well, no, I'm sure they're not going to let him back on at this point. He's got like 103,000 people following him just on BitChute, so I don't think he gives a motherfuck. That's about all. Peace out.